senhores, a partir deste momento estamos iniciando os trabalhos do 17º Seminário Nacional de Bibliotecas Universitárias, uma realização da Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul com a Comissão Brasileira de Bibliotecas Universitárias. Solicitamos mais uma vez a gentileza de todos que desliguem ou coloquem no modo silencioso seus aparelhos celulares durante as atividades no auditório. Este evento tem como tema central a biblioteca universitária como laboratório na sociedade de informação. Desde 1978, o SNBU vem promovendo o encontro e estreitando laços entre os profissionais que atuam nas bibliotecas universitárias brasileiras, alcançando um nível de maturidade que o converteu no maior e mais importante evento na área da ciência da informação no campo acadêmico. O objetivo do seminário é o de refletir sobre a biblioteca universitária como laboratório de ensino, voltado para o desenvolvimento de competências informacionais e de pesquisa, atuante na identificação e no acesso às informações necessárias para a formação profissional e o avanço do conhecimento técnico e científico. Queremos agradecer a todos os nossos patrocinadores, Patrocínio Ouro, .lib, Elsevier, Systems Link International. Patrocínio Prata, Bicateca Soluções para Educação, Sungage Learning, EBSCO e Minha Biblioteca. Patrocínio Bronze, Springer e Vértice Books. Também agradecemos aos nossos apoiadores, CAPES, CNPq, FAPERGS, Secretaria de Cultura de Gramado e Convention Bureau Gramado Canela. Agradecemos também a Bortolini Móveis pela parceria com os móveis no lounge da área de exposições do seminário. Nós reforçamos o aviso sobre o jantar gaúcho, típico gaúcho, que acontecerá amanhã, dia 20, às 20 horas, no Parque Gaúcho. Os ingressos devem ser adquiridos na secretaria com antecedência. O número de vagas para este jantar é limitado. Maiores informações na secretaria do evento. Nós iniciamos este dia de trabalhos com o eixo temático Recuperação, Disseminação e Uso da Informação. Teremos agora a conferência com o tema Serviço de Referência Virtual. Convidamos para compor o palco, como coordenadora desta atividade, a senhora Regiane Alcântara Eliel, da Unicamp. Como relatora da atividade, a senhora Márcia Valéria da Silva de Brito Costa, da Unirio. E a nossa conferencista, a senhora Lynn Conway, dos Estados Unidos. Lynn Conway é PhD, cientista de pesquisa sênior da OCLC, possui experiência em bibliotecas universitárias, públicas e escolares, bem como biblioteca e informações da educação científica. Foi pesquisadora visitante na Universidade de Sheffield, Departamento de Estudos da Informação, de projetos financiados pelo Reino Unido, para investigar comportamentos dos utilizadores, incluindo ambientes de pesquisa virtuais e repositórios digitais. Atualmente está colaborando com a GISC e com a Universidade de Oxford para estudar visitantes digitais e residentes. Os atuais projetos de pesquisa dos quais participa incluem questões bibliográficas relacionadas à forma como as pessoas procuram obter a sua informação bibliográfica. Nós passamos de imediato a palavra à nossa coordenadora, Regiane Alcântara Eliel, da Unicamp, para a coordenação dos trabalhos.
Obrigada. Bom dia, senhoras e senhores. Vamos dar início às nossas atividades de hoje, do 17º SNBU. Nossa conferência terá como tema principal Serviço de Referência, com a professora Lynn Conway. Informamos que a apresentação terá a duração de 1 hora e após teremos 10 minutos para perguntas. As perguntas poderão ser feitas por escrito ou através dos microfones que estão com as recepcionistas. Solicitamos apenas que, se forem fazer as perguntas por escrito, por gentileza anote o e-mail, porque caso não tenhamos tempo hábil para responder todas as perguntas. As responderemos posteriormente por e-mail. Então, com a palavra, a professora Lincoln, por gentileza. Obrigada.
Bom dia. Obrigada por me convidar para lugar tão bonito. Onde eu posso encontrar lugar para alugar boche. É uma honra estar aqui com vocês. And that's the extent of my Portuguese. Thank you for inviting me. I wanted to talk today about virtual reference. We've done a lot of work in this area, and one of the things we've learned with all of the user behavior studies that I have done is that convenience is number one. And this is a quote that you can see from a male who was between 15 and 18 years old. And he said, the convenience is still better online than in person. You don't have to make trips to the library. It used to be that the user built the workflow around the library. Now, the library must build the services around the user. It used to be that resources were scarce, attention was abundant. Now, attention is scarce, and resources are abundant. And as I say, we are not the only place in town or the only game in town to get information. Our users often don't even think of coming to the library. Today, more than 1.7 billion people, or almost 1 out of every 4 humans on the planet, are online. This is a quote that you've probably seen, and getting information off the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. And I have a quote, and this is from a faculty member. And so we think often that we hear things like this from younger individuals who are less experienced. I don't mean younger in age, but younger in their research experience. But we also hear it from faculty. And I'm going to read some quotes to you. And the faculty said, the unbelievable thing is that sometimes there is just an overload of information, as opposed to a paragraph consistently found, is that there is just, volumes upon volumes of information based upon one particular individual. And so time to sit through which of those information who I feel I want to convey to students can be a very difficult process. And so faculty or scholars who we think are very knowledgeable still have these problems. Librarians are ideal discovery experts. They can help users navigate and get information. I keep thinking back of Ranganathan, and I'm sure we've all learned about him in library school. And he had his 5 laws of library science. Books are for use, so we could probably change that now to items, sources, information. Every reader, his or her book. Again, we could change that word book. Every book, its reader. and the library is a growing organism. And I think we better really think back and go back to some of these things. With virtual reference, we have this opportunity to have this global reach. It's that anytime, anywhere access. We have cooperative services that may help reduce costs. It's very interesting because when we read transcripts from Question Point and other virtual reference services, and when we read these, we find out that many of the users are not located within the country of where the librarian is located answering the questions. And the users get very nervous and will say, "I'm sorry I'm keeping you awake at 2 a.m. Well, yes, it may be 2 a.m. in the country where the user is situated, but the librarian will say, "No, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon here. Oh, where are you?" And then a conversation starts, and there's a relationship. And I want to talk about relationships a bit too. Today, the study that I'm going to concentrate on is the Seeking Synchronicity study. And this was a study, it was more than $1 million US, that was funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, Rutgers University, with my colleague Marie Radford, who's on the faculty there, and OCLC. This is what we did. It's a very brief outline. And we studied the habits and needs of virtual reference services, librarians, users, and then we hit those non-users. That's a hard group to find. Now, these are not non-users of libraries, and that's something you need to remember when I talk about non-users. They are non-users of virtual reference services. They may have even used other forms of reference. We also wanted to look at their characteristics. We wanted to find out what was successful, effective for them, and what was not. And these findings were generalizable because we had very large sample sizes. We had an international group of individuals, and we did a triangulation of data collection methods. The first phase involved focus group interviews. And when we conducted the interviews, we realized that we had a group, the 12 to 18-year-olds, that Rushkoff calls screenagers. And so we had this group of screenagers who had very different perceptions, and also they were very different in their thinking about libraries and getting information. So we thought we would try to concentrate on some of these screenagers. So we made sure that they were in all of our samples. We looked at transcripts from actual virtual reference encounters. We looked at 850. Now, we had a very large group of doctoral students and master students working with us because we are still analyzing data from this project that started in 2005, and we've added more data to it. Then we did individual telephone interviews, and the numbers are available to you on the screen. We had virtual reference service librarians, the users, and the non-users. And then we did online surveys of these same groups. We used a technique called the critical incident technique. It was developed by Flanagan in 1954. And it's a qualitative research technique, and it focuses on the most memorable event or experience. And it allows categories or themes to emerge from the data rather than to be imposed by the researchers. So here's some examples of the questions we asked. And this was both in the interviews on the telephone and also in the online surveys. So we asked them to think about one experience of which you, this individual, felt a chat reference encounter achieved or did not achieve a positive result. Then we asked, describe the circumstances and nature of the reference query. Describe why you felt this was a success or not a success. We added an additional question, and this was for the VRS users, not the non-users. Did the chat format help your experience to be more successful? And then we asked, did it help your experience to be more unsuccessful? If yes, how? Now, we adapted these questions for non-users. They were very similar, but we used the different reference formats because they identified the reference formats that they actually used. So, now I'm going to talk about the transcripts. And we looked at, as I said, 850 question point transcripts. These were some of the questions that we received. And we had different ways of identifying these questions. So we sorted them out by subject. We decided to use the Dewey Decimal Classification, so we used the hierarchies of Dewey because I read studies where people reinvent the wheel. And since OCLC does have Dewey available to us, I thought, why not use something that's been around for many years that people have been updating, and then this can be replicated. We also looked at determined if they were ready reference questions, if they were procedural questions, if there was no question at all. And you'd be amazed that sometimes there's no question. So people will just email a librarian and chat. It's chat, right? Holdings, research, an inappropriate question, and I'll get into these individual types of questions very quickly here. Directional and reader's advisory. Okay, these are some examples of the subject search. Now, we also tried to replicate other studies and not reinvent the wheel. So we used Arnold and Caskey. They actually called these specific search. We called them subject search. And you can see we did not change any of these questions. So everything is verbatim. If they spelled something incorrectly, if they used a certain punctuation, that's exactly what you see. These are the ready reference questions. These are things that usually answer who, what, why, when, where. Joe Janes has written about the death of ready reference and how with the internet and Google, we don't need ready reference anymore. Our research indicates the contrary to this. And I will show you some numbers on this. And Joe is a good friend of mine, so I argue with him all the time. It's okay. The next one is procedural. And these are mostly about policies, procedures for the library. So, what's the maximum amount of checkout for something? The next is holdings. That's when they're asking if a library has a specific holding in digital or print. And you can see somebody wants to know if the library, in the one question, has textbooks to rent. The research questions. This is a question that is more, this definition is from Arnold and Caskey. I don't like this idea from an adult specialist. I don't like putting this sort of age restrictions. I would say more of someone who is an expert within that subject. So it can be a young person in age, but who is also an expert maybe at gaming. And so I think we need to be careful with this. So this was not our terminology. However, you can see that this will involve a lot more work than that, what's the capital of Brazil, or something like that. Inappropriate. This is a very interesting area because you're laughing at some of these. And the thing is, we think, and we've seen this in the transcripts, where a librarian will just turn off and say, this is inappropriate, and cut off. If the librarian probes, we often find out that these are individuals who have very legitimate questions. Yes, maybe they may have something to do with sex, or maybe they may have something about their changing bodies as they go into puberty. However, they're afraid to ask anyone face to face. And so the only person they think they can ask is this sort of virtual librarian who does have some authority and credibility. And if we don't shut them off immediately, I think we can really help them. This is the question, and it starts out here. What does it mean when a guy said he liked me more as a friend? Doesn't it mean like a GF, girlfriend? And the librarian says, what do you think it means? And the user says, well, like a relationship, but what's WUTS, you think? And the librarian says, it is a nice way of saying he wants to be friends and nothing more. And the user said, are you for real? REALLLL, exclamation point, exclamation point. And the librarian said, yes, I am. And the user says, oh, what now, I'm mad, crying, all in caps, because he said he likes me, and how am I, and how am cute, etc., and he even kisses me, etc., so I don't think that's then being a friend. Laugh out loud. Librarian says, sorry. And the librarian said, if you have to ask, you already know, right? And the user said, because I thought when a guy says more than a friend, I thought it meant as a BF, boyfriend / GF, girlfriend. You wrote, librarian, you wrote more as a friend, not more than a friend. Very different meaning, the librarian writes. User, he said more as a friend. Librarian, be honest with yourself. User, he told his friend about me, how hot I am, etc., and he likes me a lot and loves to hang out with me. I am being honest. He said he wants us to be more than friends, like a relationship. So this is what went on with the librarian and the user. Directional. These are the very basic, giving information about where something is located. So it's very information booth type thing. You'd be surprised. We also looked at question point when it was in, I'm trying to think of the name of it now, I just lost it. The virtual setting, Second Life. We looked at Second Life. The questions, we thought, oh, this will be great. We can analyze these questions, compare them against chat reference. No. All of the questions were, how do I change the clothes on my avatar? Which way is this reading room? They were all directional questions. The Reader's Advisory. I just interviewed a librarian the other day for a new project, and we're looking at virtual reference services and social question and answer sites like Yahoo Answers, and how we can work together and maybe push some questions to these social question and answer sites, and then have them push the more subject-specific questions to us as experts. And one of the librarians said to me, you know, I feel very uncomfortable in the position of Reader's Advisory. And I don't know what to do when users say, I like this author, how can you help me find another similar author? Which triggered a lot of things in my mind. Of course, I'm not supposed to be counseling the librarian at this point. I'm getting information from the librarian. But as I thought about this, I started thinking about how we can help librarians be better readers advisors. And that would be to come up with some very good recommender systems within our systems that could do things on the fly. Amazon does it. Some say well, some say not so well. They're trying to sell something, so they're going to do the best they can. You like this book on something, and they're going to push socks to you. But we could do it, I think, in a very good way. And I'm a little nervous now from talking to this librarian that we may not have a lot of confidence in ourselves in this reader's advisory area. Now, looking at these query types, now these were the transcripts from 2004 to 2006. They've changed quite a bit, and I'll compare the 2010 transcripts. But you can see that subject searching were the greatest number. So this is that very specific search that Caskey identified. Ready reference is second. So ready reference is not dead. They could Google it, but they still ask us. And procedural, and that gets into a lot of issues as well. Again, I've been interviewing and reading transcripts for this new study, and librarians in the cooperative virtual reference services are talking about how they have to be connected to colleagues because of a lot of these procedural questions, or know where other policies and procedures are available to them. When we look at 2010, look at ready reference. It's even higher than it was in 2004 and 2006, which we were very surprised at. And you can see them compared. Look at the difference between 2010 and 2004, 2006. So we have the subject searching has decreased, which was surprising to us. Now that we're looking at social question and answer sites, a lot of these subject-specific questions are pushed there. Many of you may know this. I just found this out. Whenever many users, we've watched users observe, they will go right into the bar where you put the URL and put in their search. Okay, so they won't search in Google or Yahoo or any of that. They'll go right to the URL and search, put their keywords in. Even if they do that, Google will often push them to a social question and answer site. And when they get to that social question and answer site, what they see is sort of their knowledge base. And so anyone who had that same question has it listed there with the answers, and that's where they're getting their information. So these social question and answer sites are right up there at the top and getting our users. And I think that's where they're going for much of this subject searching. You'll also see that the ready reference and the procedural have increased between 2004, 2006, and 2010. Now, we also looked at the Quidget, and that is Question Point's instant messaging service. And so we would expect that you would have these ready reference that might be very high. And you can see that chat is still higher for ready reference and subject searches and procedural than the instant messaging. Again, I think that surprised us. Now, these were the types of chat services that did not necessarily answer the question, but that received the question initially from the user. So the user originally came from either a consortium, an academic or law library, a public library, a national library, or some other that we couldn't identify. You'll see that the questions coming from users in academic and law, as well as consortium, increased in 2010, and those coming from public libraries decreased in 2010. That could be for several reasons. In the US, I'm not sure how it is in the global economy, but in U.S. public and state libraries are being cut drastically, and one of the areas they're cutting is in these more user service areas, which is very surprising. But virtual reference is one of those areas that they think, well, we can live without. And these are the ready reference questions that were received in 2010 from Question Point and from the Quidget. And you'll see again by the type of services. There's a slight increase in chat in the public libraries, just a slight one. Now, accuracy. We also looked at all of these transcripts for accuracy, so we checked their answers. Again, very time-consuming, and as you can imagine. And we wondered if we would see that 55% rule. And in 1987, Hernan and McClure did unobtrusive testing of reference libraries in the US. And they came up with this 55% rule, saying that 55% of the time, the questions were accurate. And they also said that if they weren't accurate, the material was right there in that library at that reference desk that the librarian never used to answer the question correctly. You can see that ready reference, the accuracy did increase between 2004 and 2006. It was 78% in 2004 and 6, and it went up to 90%. And we wondered, we came up with some ideas for accuracy. When we looked at the 2004-2006 statistics, we said that we could increase the 78% to 90% if the librarians would only answer the specific question asked. How do you do that? You need to clarify the question. So be sure you're answering what the user wants you to answer. And we'd like to think that we had some impact in this. We're not sure. But regardless, it did increase to 90%. So we're hoping that librarians are clarifying the question. Now, what we're telling librarians to do is to basically evaluate the sources. And my mother works in retail, and she says, one size fits no one. So I don't know if you have the one size fits all here, but it fits no one, really. And that's how our reference services are. And it's unfortunate, but whenever you think about the need, you have to understand, number one, I told you convenience is number one. If I am sitting in your library, convenience may be not standing up and walking over and talking to you. Convenience may be sitting there and typing in a question in either instant messaging or chat or text. Why? I don't want to lose my seat in your library. I don't want to leave my laptop. What we found in these transcripts was that many of the users are sitting in your library chatting to you. And we found that with the dialogue that they'd say, "Oh, I can see you, I'll come over." Or wave. So remember that. It's dependent upon the context and the situation. I have a quote, and this is from our Digital Visitors and Residents study that I'm doing with the University of Oxford that's funded by JISC. And this is a female, age 17, U.S., last year of secondary school. And she said, I used a lot of journals, like scientific journals and stuff, And then I didn't even use a computer for some of it. Like, I went to the library and found stuff there. And like, we learned how to use Google a little better, like fish out the .com and stuff. Like, you can do that. And just get the .orgs and .edus because they are more reliable sources. This was amazing to me, that these young people, we hear about these digital natives. Come on. They Google and they take what comes up first. And I have many, many quotes of that I won't get into today because that's a whole nother study. But they think that Google, if it comes up first on Google, it's always right. And this one time that this individual went to the library or conferred with a librarian and learned this little thing about .com and .edu, it changed this person's way of finding information. That's just like a young man, and I hear this all of the time. JSTOR. Do you have JSTOR here in your... Yes. Well, we hear this all the time, and I am not bashing JSTOR. I think this is an amazing story. I said this at a conference in June, and the JSTOR representative came to me and said, "You weren't very nice to us." No. I think this is amazing. A young man said to me, "A librarian taught me how to use JSTOR." He said, "Now, it's amazing. Now, every time I have a question, I go to JSTOR." Well, it's sort of that adage that we have that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you're going to pound it. And so where we need to come in is to teach them at that teachable moment. We can't be pushing when they don't want it. And that's another thing we've heard. At that teachable moment, tell them how to find this information and give them a broad spectrum, not just that one time. Because if it works, they're going to go for it. So what did we learn? Well, from the non-users, they preferred face-to-face. Again, this one size fits no one. This is really good in some ways because it's a value proposition for virtual reference. So some people think that you're competing virtual reference versus face-to-face versus text. That's not necessarily the case. You should build off of both and promote them. They don't know the service exists, and you would not know how many times we heard this. I was conducting a focus group interview with undergraduates, and one of the young men said, "I see this little icon on the library website that says, 'Ask a Librarian.'" He says, "I don't know what that is." And another person said, "I think if you click on that, there's a librarian somewhere." And somebody else said, "Really? There's a librarian there?" "Yeah, I think so." Again, I couldn't say anything because I'm interviewing, but they had no idea. They also said, "I wish we had a number where we could call someone, like a lifeline." And I thought, do they not know we have telephone reference? They don't. So we do our job so well, no one knows what we do. We need to promote ourselves more, and we just don't do that enough. Also, people are sometimes a little nervous about the format of virtual reference or chat. Many of them thought they were going into a chat room. And so I think that what we're calling these things may not be accurate. So we should probably look at that as well. I'm back to convenience. I just can't stress that enough, and convenience changes. I have a quote. This is, again, from the Digital Visitors and Residents. It's a UK undergraduate student, female, age 19. And she said, "They do often advise that we go to the library and look for books." And that's another thing we learned. Libraries equal books. but I would normally go to the internet and go to the library as my last sort of option, really. And then she laughed. It just takes me, I don't really know how to use the library. I've got to be honest, but I know how to use the internet. Yes, I would normally use the internet or sort of word of mouth of someone else who knows how to do it, that kind of thing first. What we're finding is they're always on Facebook. And what are they doing? It's not just chatting about going out after class or meeting somewhere. It's also about their assignments. They're sharing their work in Facebook. And they'll tell us, anytime I need information, I know someone will be out there to help me on Facebook. I have another quote. This is from the Seeking Synchronicity study. It was in a focus group interview, a 27-year-old female. She said, I could easily have found the information she, the librarian, found for me, but the fact that I could just ask her a question and have them look up the reference and read through articles instead of me having to look through like a million Google articles, it was definitely a nice convenience and would definitely make it more likely for me to go to them and actually ask a librarian a question or figure it out on my own. And after all, we have another quote, if it's too inconvenient, I'm not going after it. What are some of their barriers to convenience? Well, they have very difficult times with our library systems. Again, don't think this is just undergraduate students. We did a usability study at OCLC on one of our prototypes, and we had faculty come in. And in our usability lab, we're behind the glass. They don't see us. They don't hear us. We see them. We see what they're clicking on. We hear them. They call us. They don't know where we are, but they call us. They have a phone if they're having problems. We also have an observer who runs the lab, who has nothing to do with the project or the service, who sits there and helps and sort of consoles the user. Well, there was a faculty there, and he couldn't figure out the system. It was not his fault. I was teaching a developer a lesson. The developer said this was a great system. I said a user couldn't figure it out. He said, I didn't know how to use it, not a typical person. So we bring in the faculty. He can't figure out the system. He slams the desk, and he says, you're doing this to make me look stupid. And I'm smart. And this isn't fair. Well, needless to say, the developer changed his tune, but the moral of this whole story is even the brightest, most educated, scholarly individuals can't figure out our systems. When I interviewed faculty for some of these studies, they said when they walk into the library, they are intimidated. When we asked what they would like in the library, they wanted comfortable chairs, wine, beer, and coffee. The other thing is, a lot of the faculty said, and the students, that they had a very difficult time finding articles in print. They were intimidated by all those journals and bound things when they have to go back if they're not online. That was another big issue. They also complained about having to drive to a library, find a parking place, leave my home. They really don't want to do that. This is another graph, and it's showing you how convenience comes in with these, and this is the convenience factor for using virtual reference. And you'll see that the bottom lines, the convenience is very, very important. And these were the non-users. And we asked them, what would make you use a virtual reference service? And what they said, number one, convenience. So, the good thing about virtual reference is that we can deliver these resources 24/7. In the US, some of the university libraries are cutting back and only offering virtual reference services when the library is opened at peak times. Now, to many of us, that sounds like that's not probably the best thing to do. I don't know for that library, but I would say that one of the things you do need to look at is when individuals are using your virtual reference services. When are individuals using your face-to-face services? I was a visiting researcher at the University of Sheffield at the Information School, and I loved to go into the Information Commons there. It was one of the first Information Commons, I think, that was developed. And the librarian, walks in the door for the first time, and I see a desk right there that says, help. I'm petrified. I look at my colleague and I said, what does help mean? And he said, you could ask them a question. I said, about what? And he said, anything. And I said, if I have trouble printing, yep. If I have trouble with my checking out a book or finding something, yes. If I have a reference question, yes. And I said, well, how can a handful of people answer all of those questions? Oh, we have a triage. So they come, you have this first screening. If I can't answer it and it's a technical question, it goes to Joe. If it's a subject-specific question in science, then it goes to Elizabeth. And so they have this triage system, and it seems to work very well. That Information Commons is open 24/7. I have never, ever seen it when it wasn't packed with students. It's amazing. They're quiet areas, they're playing games in other areas, they're printing, they have a whole area just for online journals and experts in that area. So I really think we need to change the way we're doing things and to adapt to our users in this way. We should integrate library tools to popular sites. And a young researcher said to me, you know, libraries think they're so cool. They put up a Facebook. He said, and this is a young faculty member, he said, we don't want a Facebook site. You know, who cares? He said, if you're going to be in Facebook, do something worthwhile. So I've been looking around to see what libraries are doing that could be worthwhile in Facebook. One of the things I found, and you might want to look at this, it's on Facebook, it's the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, of all places. They created a Facebook site using two students from the 1930s. And these students, Joe Lewis and his girlfriend at the time, Leola, who became his wife, he played some sport I can't even remember, and they went to parties. So they made them come alive in Facebook. And they did this to promote their special collections. And so they made these sort of hypothetical instances of their lives and then pushed certain things in their special collections. Well, they had many, many friends on Facebook. I just talked to the library director. Facebook made them take down the individual personas because they were not alive anymore. However, they still have that page and are still very active pushing the special collections. She said that their special collection use has tripled since they started that, and it was about 10 months ago. So there are ways to do these things and to do them well. We also should offer help at the time of need. How many of you ever do online shopping? Oh, come on. Be honest. Oh, now you all. Okay. And when you're doing online shopping, if you're having trouble, you want to know if they're sized correctly or the color, is there often a chat that is there that you can click on and ask the question? Yes. Why on earth are we not doing that on our library websites or on our library catalogs? Don't wait for them to come to us for virtual reference. If you see, we should have an automatic timer. If someone is scrambling around on our site for X number of, I would even say, less than a minute, because the attention span is quick these days. Have a time. If they're fumbling around, have a chat box that comes up and says, what do you need? What can we help you with? Be there. I think this is something that we forget about. And Anna talked about this yesterday, and this is from the EDUCAUSE study. So I don't want to get too much into this. But where are our users? They're using these smartphones. They're using these little tablets. We need to be there. When I was at Cambridge University, I talked to the librarians, and afterwards we talked about they were trying to do information literacy. And so what they did is they developed an app, and so their students could just use that as they were walking through the library and say, oh, such and such is here, or if you're looking for this. And they said it has been very, very popular. We really need to think about being where our users are. How am I doing on time? Am I? Okay, good. I have a lot more quotes, so I didn't know how much time I had to spend on them. This is a UK secondary school student, last year of secondary school, female, age 17. I would use more of the iPhone. I'll step back. We asked them, what could you not live without? What tool could you not live without? I would use more of the iPhone than my computer because obviously this is always with me, whereas my MacBook is not with me at school or anything. Whereas my phone, I bring it to school and I use it. I probably use the phone more to communicate, but if it is, say, a really long message where I just want an answer straight away, if someone is online, I will then speak to them through online. Another UK student, female, age 17, secondary school. My laptop and my phone, I would not be able to live without. I think more so my phone, just because with my phone, I feel connected. So if I'm ever in difficulty or if I need to ask a question, I'm always able to do that. And it's kind of yes for security as well. I find I always feel secure when I have my phone with me. Well, when we talked to some undergraduate students and secondary school students, they often said that they would ask their fathers for information. So I probed and said, why your father? And they said, because my father will find the answer. I can text him, and he'll find me the answer, and he'll push it to me. If I ask my mother wants to teach me how to find the answer, and I don't want to do that. Again, that teachable moment. We were talking last night, and I said I'd always go to my father because he was so easy, not my mother. She always wanted to teach me something. So how do they use their smartphones? Well, they're on the internet all of the time. And they're also using it to access library resources. So if we are not there, we better be. And I really think we need to be promoting the texting. Now, when we talk to some young people about, and these are the screenagers, and the reason we're looking at these young people is because they're going to be in our universities very soon. And my belief is we're always reactive. Why not be proactive? Why not plan for these young people? And what they were saying is I only text with my family and my friends. It'd be creepy to text with someone I don't know. One of them also was very, and this is a quote, I wouldn't chat with a librarian because how do I know that the librarian isn't some psycho serial killer? Now, I thought, why on earth would someone think that? Well, when I probed, we tell young people, don't talk to people you don't know in the internet, do we not? And then what do we tell them? Talk to us. What we found with the young people in the virtual reference study was that if a librarian who they have some rapport with, some relationship with, tells them about virtual reference, or a friend or a family member who they trust, then they will use it. So what's the key here? That we should be promoting this through our users. So if we have someone who's comfortable with this, we need to hope that they're promoting it to their friends. Here again, this was a non-user of virtual reference services. I never knew this type of service existed. And that came out with many of the OCLC user perception studies. People don't know what we're offering. Again, we need to be there where our users are located. The face-to-face is still important. I can't tell you that you should, do away with face-to-face, because many people still feel, even those who use virtual reference, their preference is face-to-face. Why don't they use it all the time? It's not convenient. And so we have to build a rapport in this virtual space. Again, we need to introduce this so that they know us, feel comfortable with us, and with what we're offering. These were some of the things we found out that what's effective in virtual reference from the user's perspective and from the librarian. Again, convenience, comfort. Am I comfortable with this? Even these young people who we think are so technologically savvy, they're really not. And they don't feel comfortable in some of our systems. Accuracy is very important. We did find with users, if they got an answer and the answer was accurate and they had a good rapport with the librarian, they thought the success rate was very high. If they didn't get an answer, but the librarians either sent them off, referred them to a subject specialist, or said that the librarian would get back to him or her, and they still had a good rapport, they still said it was a success. So what does that tell us? Be nice. And one of the things that in the beginning of virtual reference that I think some managers thought was, we'll take this grouchy person from the desk and put them in a virtual environment. Guess what? They can be grouchy in a virtual environment too. And so we really need to be careful and learn that we have to have this relationship. Librarians, they really like the ability to send this very specialized knowledge to the users, to have some time. We found that users are willing to wait 1 hour for a subject specialist, 1 hour, because they want the answer. They like the positive attitudes, the feedback that they get from the users, and they like the relationships that they build. What were not effective, what didn't work in virtual reference, very similar to what doesn't work in face-to-face. Users don't like grumpy, ill-informed, or uninterested librarians. Many of the undergraduates and the screenagers told us, I hate it. One of them said, when I go into the library, or when the teacher tells us to go to the library or the professor, you can smell the despair in the room. We don't want to go in there because the librarians point to places and then we don't know what they're pointing to and we're afraid to ask again. Again, we've got to give this a very different face to these users. Another thing they don't like is being sent to Google. We've seen this in the transcripts. A librarian will do a Google search and push information to the user. The user will come back and say, I went to Google. I came for you for something else. And that's another thing we need to remember. We can bring something else to the table. Librarians want straightforward questions. They don't want rude users, and they don't like when users just disappear. They talk about unrealistic expectations. Many of the users will come in and say, I have 2 minutes, I need this right now, find it. And the librarians don't like that. From the critical incident techniques, ask open questions. So be very open. Again, it's trying to find out what they really need. And one person, especially in the virtual environment, a person asked in a transcript, how old do you have to be to dive, D-I-V-E? So the librarian went to all of these links to get all the regulations on diving, diving, sent it off, and the user wrote back and said, I don't want diving, I want driving, D-R-I-V-I-N-G. So they spent a lot of time and didn't answer the question. So be very open, ask questions, clarify the question, pay attention to the close. Thank them, tell them that if they need anything else, they can come back, send them the contact information, and also email them or text them or send them the information so that they have it for later. Always be polite. The graduate students were very worried about privacy. They were afraid that the transcripts could get into the hands of their major professors, and their major professors would think that they were not very smart or that they should know something. And so we really need to make it clear that the information that they're getting is only between the librarian and them. Now you're looking at me and saying, but you looked at 850 transcripts. I had no identifying information for a librarian or for user. So all of those were scrubbed, and so I know nothing about who submitted questions or who answered or did not answer questions. The mode for developing best relationships, you can see, and this was with virtual reference users and librarians, is still that face-to-face. However, it's not always convenient. And so if we can transition them from the face-to-face into virtual, it will probably be very good for us. As I said, it's all about the relationships. The death of ready reference is greatly exaggerated. Convenience is our hook. So convenience is dependent. It depends. And so you're going to have to be everywhere, and that's not what you want to hear now. I think we need to find an economic model that we can use so that we can better schedule our reference services so that we're covered in all aspects, in the chat, in the email, in the face-to-face, in the text, so that we can hit all points. Marketing really does matter. And when I ask questions about journals and things to the users, they would talk about, and they don't call them journals, but that's what they were talking about. And I said to them, oh, can I use these same sources that you're using? Can I just get to these? And they'd look at each other and say, no, I don't think so. We pay the university fees, and the university provides these to us. Library was never mentioned. In our most current study, the Digital Visitors and Residents study, we developed a code book from the subjects, from what they told us. And these were the undergraduate students and last year of secondary school. Librarian was never mentioned once as a source. One individual talked about the lady in the library. And when which I should never have done as a researcher, said, "Oh, you mean the librarian?" The young man said, "No, the lady in the library." So we are not coming up in their minds as being anything with the resources that they're getting except books and a place. And that really needs to change. As I mentioned earlier, our current research is called Cyber Synergy and seeking sustainability through collaboration between virtual reference and social question and answer sites. And so we are looking at both virtual reference and social Q&A. And what we're thinking as we're looking at these things is that maybe there's a way for us to be these subject specialists and get into these social Q&A sites. There is a consortium in Scotland who has been going to to Yahoo Answers, actually, and they answer 1,500 questions a month within specific subject areas. They said it's been a great success. At the bottom of their answers, thank you. At the bottom of their answers, they will say, "This was answered by librarians at such and such." Yahoo Answers did ask them to take that off. They didn't like that idea that they were promoting themselves as librarians. But again, I think that we have a very, very specific place in this arena and that we should be players there. I have a very extensive bibliography if you're interested, and our research assistant has been very good in helping to prepare this presentation, Alyssa Darden. And now I turn it over for questions and discussion, and I'll get the interpreter, Daniel, to help me. Obrigado.
Professora Lynn, agradecemos imensamente pela excelente palestra, que nos ajudou a pensar em quais caminhos trilhar para realizar um serviço de referência mais efetivo, de forma que os nossos usuários se sintam um pouco mais confortáveis com os nossos sistemas de informação. Então, agora nós passamos para as perguntas, que vocês podem utilizar os microfones ou encaminhar por escrito. Alguma pergunta? Tem alguma pergunta?
Yes, I can, Daniel.
Alguém? Ok.
Bom dia, Lynn. Eu sou Daniela Spudeit, bibliotecária do Senac de Florianópolis. Quero te parabenizar pela palestra. Eu vivo um dilema hoje lá com a minha equipe, porque, ao mesmo tempo que a gente tenta desenvolver algumas atividades para poder proporcionar o desenvolvimento da competência em informação nos alunos, Literacy Information, né? A gente também tenta desenvolver alguns serviços virtuais, como você citou. E a gente tem esse dilema, porque alguns querem as pesquisas prontas, e outros a gente tem que ensinar a fazer as pesquisas, a buscar. Então, qual é o ponto de equilíbrio?
That's a very difficult question, not unusual. As I mentioned earlier, it's that teachable moment And what we're learning with many of the, I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I'm going to take. And what we're learning with many of the universities is what they're talking about, the embedded librarian. Has that concept been used here much? No. Embedded librarian? No. That's where the librarian actually is sitting in classes, participating with in the lectures, working with the faculty, and that's proven to be much more effective for teaching these information literacy skills. The others who you're saying just want the information, I think we need to give them the information. We can try to teach, but if they don't want it, it's not going to work. But I think this embedded librarianship has been a new concept within the U.S. The medical library at Johns Hopkins University announced last year that they were closing the physical library, and that the librarians have been working virtually anyway, and that the clinicians and physicians have been using all online sources. Now, they thought they were going to get away with that, but there's been a lot of rebuttal from that. And so they still have the physical library, but they are moving away from that. And so I think this embedded librarianship is something that is very, very important to start to look at, because right now we're centered around the place and books, and we're going to be migrating away from that. And if you're involved with them in their teaching and learning, it makes a big difference.
Mais alguma questão?
Bom dia, sou Letícia. Lin, como você vê as dificuldades administrativas de se manter turnos de referência virtual dentro das bibliotecas? Os bibliotecários têm dificuldades e, inclusive, com características diferentes, e uma comunidade também com características diferentes, de conseguir manter pessoas que, com um certo nível de especialização, possam atender adequadamente às diferentes demandas. Imagino que essa seja uma tarefa administrativa bem complicada para a manutenção dos plantões de referência virtual.
Well, what I've been learning through interviews with the librarians is that if they're in a consortium, that they do have, like Question Point, I know, they do have the librarian user group meetings. There are policies, there are procedures, there are, about subject specialists, you need to know where the policies are for the different libraries. So all of those things are key. So if you have a consortium like the Question Point, you have a coordinator for that, and we also have backup librarians. If you're doing it alone, say in your university library, it can be complicated, but I think it's even much simpler, because you know your policies, your procedures, but you're more the consortium. Yes, with the consortium, you need to be much more structured. You need to, and there's certain guidelines and a level of excellence that is expected. And so the answers, the transcripts are all analyzed, the samples, and there's training. So it's not something that's you just jump into without having this structure. So it's good if you can get involved in a consortium that is already in existence, because they will have developed a lot of these. But you're right, it's complicated.
Alguma outra questão? Não? Ok. Então, nós queremos agradecer mais uma vez a professora Aline, muito obrigada. E queremos entregar um certificado e uma lembrancinha do evento. Muito obrigada. Nós vamos fazer agora um intervalo de 20 minutos e retornaremos logo após. Obrigada.
Nossos agradecimentos a Lynn Conway, Regiane Alcântara Eliel e Márcia Valera da Silva de Brito Costa por suas participações. Nós solicitamos a todos que preencham, por gentileza, o formulário de avaliação do seminário, que está disponível no site do evento, no ícone Avaliação do evento. É muito importante a participação de todos na avaliação. Nós informamos a todos que as sessões temáticas da tarde, que tem seu início às 14 horas, terão acesso permitido somente no início de cada apresentação e não durante as apresentações, para não prejudicar os apresentadores dos trabalhos. Nós faremos agora um intervalo de 20 minutos para o coffee break e retornaremos com a sequência dos trabalhos.